Hello, hello, hello. My name is Snorri, and I'm here to talk about my new single called The Darkest Descent, which is the second single from my upcoming album. I am weary, don't let me rest. Yes, I remembered the name of my own album. The album is out on Moderna Records on June 16th, but let's talk about The Darkest Descent. Here we go. So, like the title track that I talked about in my last video, this song starts with a very simple piano motif. Let's have a listen. And now you've kind of heard the entire song. This song is 6 verses of that, but the trick is that, just like I Am Weary, it just ever so slightly builds with each repetition. This main piano stays the same throughout the entire song, but yeah, each verse has an added intensity to it. And the only difference in the piano in the second verse from the first verse, for example, is that the first verse is played in free tempo. So it has more expression. I allow myself to be, to have more space in between these chords, these phrases. But when some other elements join in the second verse, I go to a steady tempo, so I record with a click track with a steady beat in my ear. But let's get a little bit nerdy. I want to talk about what's actually happening in this motif. So this idea here, what we've got here harmonically, and you can tune in about 2 minutes if you get bored. I'll try to be quick here. Harmonically, so we've got 4 voices, 4 notes, and I do this a lot because I have my choral background, so I think a lot when I'm writing. I think in terms of bass, tenor, alto, soprano, or cello, viola, second violin, first violin, if you will. What we've got here is a simple C major 7th chord, except we've got the 5th of the chord, which is G, is the bass. So instead of having here with the fundamental as the bass, we have the fundamental as the tenor, and the bass is the 5th. So yeah, and what I like about that is that it gives me the opportunity of moving the chord up and down, but only in the outer voices. So only in soprano and bass, but keeping the middle voices, the tenor and the alto, the same. And it gives you this really nice progression. You can play around with it as you will, and I have in the past, because I like stealing from myself when I'm tired and can't think of new ideas. So I have this track that hopefully 1 or 2 of you will have heard. It's called Atteo Era, and it's the last track of my album Landbrot on Landbrot 2. 2, Icelandic for 2, not complicated. So there's this middle part in this track that has a chord progression that goes like this. I'm just doing exactly what I've been describing. So if it's in a different key, but if I put it in the same key as the darkest descent, it would go something like that. And that's where the idea for this new motif comes from. Yeah, just a little harmony for you. Mainly for me, let's be honest, but yeah, mainly for me. Okay, like I said, the piano stays the same throughout, except I add to it. And that happens first in verse 4. So let's see what happens there. Ooh, no, let's listen to just the piano. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. Just the piano. Here you go. So just very simple second line and upper line, and again it's just to add intensity. It's faster paced. We've got eighth notes. Yes, it's a very slow tempo, but it's still, you know, we're in Snorri world here. So in this tempo, these are actual eighth notes, and it's just to give a bit more tempo and drive to the track, which leads me to what happens in verse number 5, where we've got this going on. So what we've got here is the exact same little simple polyrhythm that I was talking about in my last video. These videos are just me talking about how I reuse my own ideas again and again and again. Not that this is originally my own idea even, but yeah, what we've got, we had the, sorry, let me play for you here. This line in the piano is in eighth notes, but then the new line is in triplets against those eighth notes. So we've got the 3 against 2, tam taka tam tam taka ta, or for my people in Veracruz, it's the café con pan. If you know, you know. Yeah, and so just this simple polyrhythm, and again for the same purpose, I'm just adding a bit more tempo, or rather I'm adding the illusion that there's more tempo and more drive. Yeah, and I think sort of outside of the rhythm, tonally the inspiration for this second line is most probably, I don't think it was conscious, but sort of looking at it after the fact, it was very likely, if you know Ravel's famous piano concerto, the slow movement, where it starts with a piano and the chords, but then later when you hear the main motif being repeated in the orchestra, I think it's some woodwinds that are playing the main theme, then the piano is just like playing these beautiful slow runs around the main melody. It's just absolute perfection. If you know, you know, and if you don't, look it up. Yeah, so that's where I suspect my subconsciousness was taking this idea from. And this is in verse number 5, which is sort of the climax of this track. And in verse 6, we're just back to the main piano without the upper lines. And that's it for the piano. Now we're going to go a little bit verse by verse. We're going element by element, but we're also going verse by verse a little bit. So you've heard verse 1 is just the piano. As you can see, there's nothing else happening. But in verse 2, let's see what happens. So what we've got is just a very simple interplay between mainly the cello and the viola. And again, very, very simple phrases. Simple two-note motif, followed in the cello, followed by the viola, and sort of answers. And then the cello finishes off, and the solo strings, they again, same as the piano, they more or less repeat this throughout. This is the third verse. Starts the same viola phrase, but slightly more dynamic. And this is just the same. And then in verse 4, again, same, just more dynamic again. Just keep building, but so obviously, like I've talked about, the piano is the same underneath, but I'm just, again, increasing the intensity with each repetition. So very similar things happening in the strings there, except, you know, I start to play around it, but the cello gets to express itself slightly more than just that two-note phrase. It gets to have a bit of a solo phrase, and I even brought in the first violin. There, and then in verse 5, it's the same thing, except then I bring even the second violin also, so then all 4 instruments of the string quartet are playing. Starts the same again, but then here come both violins plus the viola. So again, just repeating, but slightly more intensity with each repetition. And in the last verse, the sort of more quiet outro, we have the same start, except it's in the violin now. I think that's the first violin, and then the viola comes back with the same reply. And then the second violin repeats the same. And this is just a neat little production tool I use quite a lot, which is very effective, that if you have a repeated phrase like here, why not use two separate instruments on that phrase to have it, you know, yeah, it's the same, it's both violins, but it's two different players. So the first time you hear it, it's the first violin, and then when you hear it the next time, it just sounds a little bit different because there's a different human being playing it, and coming in with different feel to it. So it gives you something new, even though it's the same thing pretty much. So these are the solo strings, but now let's get to the really fun part of this track and the meat of this track. And this is just like an old school swashbuckling romantic. It's a slow, sad romantic, but it's I just love this old school orchestral string feel, and I was so, yeah, it doesn't take much for me to like, oh yeah, let's add some orchestral string to this, and that's exactly what I did here. And actually, when I remember when I was writing this, I was at the piano, I was just playing this same theme that you've heard now 1,000 times. I remember thinking as I'm playing this that, oh, this would sound so nice with just like an orchestral warm blanket on top. So that's what I tried to do, and here we can hear it. So, as you can hear, the voicings of this, it's just doing the same, quite literally the same as the piano. I'm just following it. Like I said, it's just supposed to be a warm blanket on top of it, just surrounding it. At this point, of course, we have the solo strings as well, so this is what it sounds with everything. And then I even double the orchestral strings for the next verse. So what happens, and I think I brought up the scores, yes. So this is, so this is the score for the main orchestral strings here. We can have a quick listen and look at the score even. It's missing the upper because that was just recorded separately. Now, what you're going to hear are these overdubs here. So these little, okay, sorry, I'm tired. What you're hearing are these overdubs. These are basically, yeah, you can see what I wrote here. So sul-tasto means that it's played sort of up on the bridge, the bowing position. It's up on the bridge, so you get a softer, warmer sound than if you were played in a more traditional position. So it's basically just whole notes, but I wrote with short, episodic, soft, but fast trems. So trems are tremolos, so it's when you do a very fast, rapid movement of the bow, like tick, 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 tick. And so it's basically playing a long note. Each player is doing on randomly, and it just creates this beautiful textural blanket that provides this extra color for the next verse, and extra intensity. These little la 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 add intensity to it as well. And this might be probably my favorite thing about this piece, and I just kind of, when I realized I was going to use the orchestra, I figured that when I was doing this jump here, in the orchestra, that I really wanted to use portamento, meaning that to have the player slide up, la, very over the top and romantic, but it sounds so nice. Sounds so nice. Just listen. And they're all doing that. Even when they go down again. La, la. So nice. First violins finally, and you'll notice that they are basically just doubling up on that second piano line. So remember the second piano line, which comes in here in verse 4, then gets a partner in the first violins before, in this space before verse 5. So just playing in unison. And one thing that these extra textural strings here that I was talking about, that you can hear at the very end here, is that they kind of glue everything together. When there's space in between phrases in the main strings here, you hear them, this texture underneath. Here, it glues everything together. It's so useful just from a practical point of view. It's so useful. And so to end it, because it doesn't end on like a traditional, I don't go to the tonic, the harmonic tonic ending type chord. It's so useful to have this textural blanket take us out of it. And it just leads us out of it, and it's there while the piano and the solo strings are finishing this song. You can still hear it, it's still there, the glue that ties everything together. And here you're about to hear of another very simple trick that I use quite often. So right now, you're only hearing the reverb from that texture, from that orchestral texture, and I do this quite a lot, just to help and create some like eerie fade outs instead of just fading out. Yes, I am fading out the actual orchestral strings, but I'm still sending at full volume to the reverb. So the reverb from the strings continues even though the main signal is dying out. So here you can hear that these are the actual strings still playing, but as I fade them out, the reverb, this eerie soundingness, this is just the reverb that's left. That's all that's left. And again, it just adds to this glue that's keeping everything together here in the outro. There is also this sub bass that I try to sneak in at every opportunity, just again for to add some depth to the track. It's mainly just doubling up on the piano here. So let's play it let's play it solo first so you can hear what's going on. Doesn't sound very exciting on its own, but it does. You would notice it so much if I would take it out when we play the full track. So with the piano, you can see it's just doubling the piano really, but octaves below. Also has, in relation to the orchestral strings, it has kind of a practical purpose here in the fact that a lot of the time in this, when you're writing simple arrangements like this, you tend to have the double basses just sustaining the bass notes. But I wanted to, they are playing around with the rest of the strings here. They are doing these glissandes up like the rest of the orchestra, like here. So so this synth bass, which is just again this Juno 106 that's here next to me, its purpose is to sort of maybe fill up that space that maybe if I would have arranged it slightly differently, the double basses would be occupying. So we can play the orchestra and the bass together. Hear a huge difference, but I hear a huge difference when I don't play the bass with it, and it just it just stretches everything out and gives it more weight somehow. What else do we have here? Oh yes, the very ending of the track. I finished the track here. So let's play the outro with everything, or just the end of the outro. this wave sound sort of flushing over us. And I really like how it sounds with just the reverb that's left from the orchestra. So it's quite a long ending with just this wave sound. And if you're interested, this isn't, you might, your wishful thinking is probably telling you that I went to some black sand Icelandic beach to record this, and sorry to disappoint, I absolutely didn't. This is again from the same synth. It's noise from the synth with this chorus effect that creates this circular motion that you hear, this how it washes over us like a wave. And then I treated it, I pitched it down in few different places and treated it with all sorts of things. And the reason I put it here is mainly if you listen to the album as a whole, and that's very much how I write the album. I write it as a whole, and there's a strategic placement for every track. And at this moment in time of the album, this is track 7, and this track is very much a response to the track that comes before it, and even this texture here in the strings is a reference to the track that came before. And I just felt like I needed a breather at the end of this track. This is such a, it's not like a super heavy track or anything, but it's very sort of emotional. It's very dramatic, and I just needed to rest a little bit and breathe a little bit before I get to the next track on the album. And that's why I just decided to give myself and you this minute of just this beautiful sounding noise. And to me, when I listen to the whole album, this is one of my favorite moments on the entire album. It's just when this noise hits you after this like calming, it's almost like ASMR type of thing. It's just like this calming noise wave washing over you after this dramatic heaviness that comes before. There's also a little reference in this, the following track on the album will be called At Last I Touched Upon the Lonely Shore. And so this is a little bit, it sounds like a wave, and it's a little bit like we're reaching that shore. We're already at that shore before we get to that track. That's pretty much it for this track. I feel like I may have been rushing through this a tiny little bit without giving you an example of what it sounds like, and it's with all the elements together. So I think, we can maybe just listen to the track together, and verse by verse, you can see what comes in at what time, and I can maybe tell you a little bit what's happening. But just let's have a listen to the track. This is The Darkest Descent. This was the Darkest Descent. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Snorri. I'll put a link in the description for where you can listen to the full track and the last track as well. I am weary, don't let me rest. But thank you so much for listening and for watching. I'll see you for the next one.